Some American crews only realized German tanks were approaching when dark silhouettes suddenly emerged through the dust already inside firing range. Others heard engines somewhere through the haze without knowing whether the sound belonged to retreating convoys or German armor moving closer through the valley. At Kasserine Pass, the battlefield started collapsing faster than many American units could understand. The first warning was usually movement, dust rising across open ground, shapes appearing through the haze, vehicles nearby suddenly reversing before anyone fully understood what was approaching. Then the tanks appeared. German armor used terrain, smoke, and speed to close distance fast enough that some American anti-tank crews only had seconds to react after enemy silhouettes entered view. Some tanks disappeared behind hills for moments before reappearing much closer than expected. The battlefield changed almost immediately. Tank fire echoed across the valleys, while machine guns cut through slopes already filling with smoke and debris. Some American positions opened fire the moment movement appeared through the haze. Others fired directly into moving dust clouds before fully confirming what was inside them. That hesitation became dangerous. Several crews suddenly saw nearby vehicles reversing at full speed before realizing German armor had already entered sectors they believed were still secure. For many American troops in Tunisia, this was their first major confrontation against experienced German armored forces, and within hours, the battlefield was already becoming harder to control. As the fighting spread, the battlefield became harder to reach. Some positions continued fighting before realizing nearby sectors had already collapsed around them. Others arrived expecting support and instead found abandoned positions still filled with damaged vehicles and equipment left behind during rapid withdrawal. Radio traffic intensified constantly. Requests for artillery support, fuel, reinforcements, and updated positions overlapped, while reports describing German armor in completely different sectors started arriving almost simultaneously. The battlefield was changing faster than information could move through it. Soon, even identifying the direction of danger became difficult. Troops preparing to defend one sector suddenly came under fire from another. Smoke and overlapping movement forced crews to hesitate for crucial seconds before deciding whether approaching vehicles were friendly or German. That hesitation became increasingly dangerous. Some troops moving between positions suddenly discovered German vehicles already crossing roads they believed were still safely behind the line. Several positions stopped transmitting entirely without nearby units, immediately understanding whether the troops had withdrawn or been overrun. The battlefield no longer felt connected. It felt broken apart. As German forces pushed deeper toward Kasserine Pass, movement through the battlefield started collapsing. Fuel trucks, ambulances, anti-tank guns, reinforcements, retreating convoys, damaged vehicles, and exhausted troops all became compressed into the same narrow roads. Smoke drifted constantly through the pass, while artillery continued striking routes already crowded with movement. At times, convoys trapped inside the pass could hear fighting growing closer, while the vehicles around them remained unable to move. Then, the congestion became dangerous. Damaged trucks and burning wrecks blocked sections of road, while smoke drifting through the valleys sometimes hid blocked routes until convoys were already too close to stop or turn around cleanly. Some retreating vehicles suddenly stopped behind burning wrecks, while more traffic continued arriving from behind. Drivers attempting to reverse often discovered there was no remaining space left to maneuver once more vehicles accumulated behind them. Vehicles backed into each other, while artillery continued landing across roads already filled with smoke, panic, damaged equipment, and immobilized convoys. Some crews abandoned vehicles that were still operational simply because there was no clear route left to move them through. Others left stalled vehicles entirely and continued through rocky slopes on foot, while trapped convoys remained motionless, listening to fighting somewhere ahead through the smoke. The battlefield was no longer expanded. Now it was locking shut. By the later stages of the battle, the collapse spreading through Kasserine was no longer limited to movement or visibility. Now the front itself was starting to break apart. Some American units continued defending isolated positions for hours before realizing nearby sectors had already fallen silent around them. Others withdrew through roads where smoke, blocked vehicles, and conflicting reports made it increasingly difficult to understand where German forces had already reached. German vehicles started appearing across road. Many troops still believed were safely behind the line. Some reinforcements continued advancing towards sectors that had already collapsed before updated information could reach them. Several positions stopped firing entirely without nearby troops immediately understanding whether the sectors had withdrawn or been overrun. The uncertainty kept spreading. Some crews repositioned weapons toward distant movement, only to hear gunfire erupt much closer behind them moments later. The fighting no longer felt like a connected battle. It felt like isolated pockets trying to survive inside a battlefield already breaking apart. By the final stages of the fighting around Kasserine Pass, many American units were no longer attempting to restore their original positions. Smoke drifted constantly through roads filled with damaged vehicles, abandoned equipment, stalled convoys, exhausted troops, and retreating traffic still trying to escape through the pass. Movement became slower with every passing hour. Some convoys remained trapped behind blocked roads, while artillery strikes continued landing somewhere ahead through the haze. Others suddenly discovered there was no longer enough room to move forward or reverse once more. Vehicles accumulated around them. Some crews abandoned operational vehicles simply because there was no clear route left to move them through safely. Others left damaged equipment scattered along the roads, while troops continued withdrawing on foot through rocky slopes beside immobilized convoys. At times, withdrawing vehicles could hear engines somewhere through the smoke without immediately knowing whether the sound belonged to German armor or retreating American traffic. Even after leaving collapsing positions behind, many units still had no clear understanding of where German forces had already reached. The battlefield no longer resembled the open desert American troops had entered days earlier. Now it felt closed, fragmented, blocked, and exhausted. And as the fighting around Kasserine finally began slowing, the battle had already delivered a lesson many American troops would not forget. The battlefield had not collapsed all at once. It became harder to see, harder to organize, harder to cross, and harder to survive, one stage at a time.